Cue the music.
That's our music, right?
Well, it would be music from Vendetta. I don't know whether you've ever listened to the show or not.
I can't even remember the music from Vendetta. I don't think it was very interesting.
All right, stop it. Hello and welcome to episode 35 of HardcoreGaming101.net's top 47,858 games of all time podcast, where we objectively, definitively, and scientifically rank the games you nominate. My name is Xerxes, and I am Make Good Podcast. My panelists today are...
I'm Bobinator.
I'm Carl.
And I'm Satanga.
On this podcast, we have three rules. Rule 1, all rankings are final, official, and scientifically accurate. Rule 2, you can nominate one game via a 5-star review in iTunes or Stitcher. For the time being, we have stopped taking nominations via Twitter. Rule 3, you can nominate games that have already been nominated. Just don't nominate games we've already ranked. Don't be that guy. You can see the master list for yourself. Check it out at bit.ly/47kgame. The next game we're going to be talking about is Streets of Rage 2, a Genesis classic. It was nominated by Julesy via a 5-star Stitcher review. Julesy writes, always an interesting listen, even if it's a game I've never even heard of, and it's a must listen for any retro gamer enthusiast. I would like to request that you scientifically and accurately rank the Sega Genesis classic Streets of Rage 2. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do, Julesy. In fact, we're going to have quite a few beat 'em ups. Is this episode all beat 'em ups? It's an all beat 'em up.
Yeah, apparently so.
It's
an
extravaganza of one of my personal favorite genres, beat 'em ups or brawlers or belt scrollers, as they're also known as in some nationalities.
Okay, all right. So,
fighting games.
Streets of Rage 2. It was developed by Ancient. It was published by Sega for the Sega Mega Drive, Sega Genesis. Earliest known release date and territory is December 20th, 1992 in North America. It was the North American version was released before Bare Knuckle 2.
Apparently the Japanese version came in like January 93 for some reason.
Which is odd because I think the carts both contain like both versions of the games, right? And it's whatever model Genesis you have is what determines what you see. It's the same as Revenge of Shinobi.
I mean, I haven't looked at the other games, but maybe the Japanese Christmas period was kind of had different other games on it, so they delayed it.
Well, I know that because I don't have the Streets of Rage cartridges. I have the Bare Knuckle cartridges, the Japanese ones, and when I put them in my Genesis, it just shows up as Streets of Rage. So, which bugs me because I think the name Bare Knuckle is so much cooler.
Yeah, Streets of Rage sounds more like it's some sort of cheesy Arnold action film or what have you. Bare Knuckle sounds a lot more germane to what you're actually doing. But
Bare Knuckle sounds like a Steven Seagal film or something.
Exactly, that's what I want.
So
I like the name Streets of Rage because, especially in the first game, it really defines the game. It takes place on the streets, and you're raging. That's it. The game is.
You don't look angry at all. You're just chilling.
You're angry about the state of crime in the city.
Hang on.
I think. Is it called the city?
Level 5 took place on a boat, so that's.
I don't think they. To respond to Cal, I don't think they ever named the city, if I recall correctly.
Because I know in our upcoming game after this one, it's Dead End City, which is the worst name for a city ever.
Yeah, it sounds like crimes everywhere with a name like that.
But okay, so Streets of Rage 2, we haven't done Streets of Rage 1, so this is the follow-up to a game we haven't sort of looked at, but it is, I guess this is kind of Sega's response to Final Fight in a lot of ways. You know, they did Golden Axe, they did a bunch of other beat-em-ups, and then Final Fight came out, and I guess Sega sort of scrambled and went, this game's good, this game's hot, people like it, let's make a game that's pretty similar, like another punching people in streets and situations and collecting items and beating them up with items. And this is the sequel to that game, where it's kind of bigger and better and got a lot of little tweaks that make it really great.
I want to say real quick, I never considered like the original Streets of Rage to be really all that great, but I would say it is important because it's like a direct competition to the Super Nintendo version of Final Fight, which had a lot of missing features and was not the best supports.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's weird because when I think of Streets of Rage, I always think about it as in competition with the coin-op original of Final Fight, which is not true. Like it was competing directly with the crappy Super Nintendo, bastardized port. In that respect, it's like vastly superior, even though it is a pretty bald remake, like rip off essentially. It's hard to call it anything else. But we're not talking about that one, and that doesn't mean it's bad. By the way, I'm just saying it is like the Galaga of
Does that mean
it has some mechanical differences? But yes, Streets of Rage 2 takes the mechanical differences even further.
Yeah, I was going to say, does that mean Streets of Rage 2 is also competing with Final Fight 2?
No, I don't think so. I think Streets of Rage was popular enough that they would have put out a Streets of Rage 2 even if there were no Super Nintendo sequels.
Yeah, Streets of Rage 2, Sega released a ton of sequels, surprisingly, on the Mega Drive, and then they sort of stopped making sequels for the Saturn and the Dreamcast, even though they really desperately needed them. But they,
what are you
they
talking about? The Saturn sells itself.
So, I'd like to talk about the story real quick, if that's okay.
Go for
it.
Oh, okay.
Basically, there is this crime syndicate called, creatively enough, the Syndicate. Sega's not really great at naming things, let's be honest. But you beat up there later in the first game, Mr. X, and he apparently is resurrected, according to the intro. And the first thing he does is kidnap one of the guys from the original game, Adam. And so there are 4 people who gather together. You play as 2 of them at once. And you have 4 characters, and you set off to go and rescue Adam. You've got Axel, who's your Cody-esque average guy. He's pretty much Cody in a headband.
Axel sucks. That's my piece.
More like Axel Battler, am I right? I just thought...
That's good. That's probably deliberate.
I'll shut up. Continue, Bob.
You've got Blaze, the lady. She's actually not the fast but weak person in this, which is kind of surprising.
Yeah.
She's interesting because she is basically... She's the god tier character. She's by far the strongest of the 4 playable characters. She's kind of supposed to be the fastest, but I think they've messed up her numbers, so now she's kind of the fastest and also hits the hardest in a lot of ways. So, well done. Good teamwork.
You've got Adam's younger brother, Skate, and I do mean younger. He has to be in high school at the very most, because I do love the idea of having a small child just demolish an entire crime syndicate just by beating people up at random.
Is this the only genuine child character in a beat 'em up? Not like a... somehow like plot
Baby
reasons
Commando.
they're not actually a child, but this Skate is clearly a kid. He is like a punk-ish skater boy kid. That's what he is.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, you've got Max, Adam's wrestler friend, and he's the grappler, and he's really great if you're good at grappling the enemies.
Max
I love Max because he's just added into the game. Just like, wow, Hager's really popular. We need a big, strong character. So, and Max was there too. Like, he's such like it just. Oh, I'm just here to help you guys out, and then he disappears completely for Streets of Rage 3.
I mean, like the it's kind of like the beat 'em up, like the vigilante, like street vigilante beat 'em up theme is like perfect fit for pro wrestling because it's just as theatrical and ridiculous. What I'd like to know is like what kind of gangs are these anyway? They have like the ability to resurrect a person from the dead. Like, where do they have scientists on the payroll? Like, how do they do this? Like,
it's kind of in 3. It goes really deep into like they got robots and all this like super tech.
This is the weirdest gang ever. It's like, why are they wasting their time like doing whatever, like shaking down old ladies for money on the street? Like, what is the point? Like, why are they even involved?
Well, because it's so crazy because they've got a mix of Muay Thai boxers, street toughs, ninjas. Like this is like and the alien for some reason. Like this is the tier of people that we're dealing with.
And bikers, kung fu masters, robots.
Robots.
That. Yep.
How do they find these people? They resemble what they really resemble is like Cobra from the G.I. Joe cartoon. Right? They're just like like some kind of magically staffed they just have every kind of bad guy imaginable. They just flock to this one gang.
It should be
To get into the gameplay real quick, this game is very similar to Final Fight, the original, but it pretty much does everything better. There's just more of everything. More moves, more types of enemies, just everything has been polished and rebalanced, so it just stands out so much better on its own.
And it really is made for like console gameplay. It's not an arcade game. that's been slightly tweaked so it's sort of playable on a console. Like it really is made for being, played on the Genesis with like the 3-button chunky controller and all that stuff.
It is built to be finished without needing credits. You don't actually need the credits the game gives you. You can get good enough at this game in its normal difficulty quite readily and beat the game without continuing. That's just more than possible.
Yeah, I think it only gives you like 2 credits normally, but like you may only even need 1 if even at that. This game is challenging enough, but very fair, and I feel that if you just like keep aware of all the enemies and how to fend them off at all times, that you should be able to, clear it pretty easily, even like your first play of the game. Like, I think like the only major pains in the butt are Jet. I believe Abadidi, the wrestler, also sucks. Mostly the boss.
Don't forget Bear the boxer. He is a huge
Bear's
pain.
the son of a bitch, Yeah, Bear's deadly as hell.
That guy sucks, but...
the bosses are good, though. I think in terms of they're all different. They all have little tricks and gimmicks. They're all very well animated, as is the rest of the game. They really pushed animation in this game as far as... If you compare this to even like any SNES game, this game is amazingly more animated. There's so much detail in the frames. It's really great.
I mean, not only the graphics, but the sound design too, which goes without saying is one of, if not the best soundtrack composed on the Genesis, it's up there definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Izo Koshiro is a rad video game composer, and the Streets of Rage trilogy is often thought of as kind of his magnum opus. It's one of the very few game soundtracks that my brother actually likes on the Genesis. He normally finds the Gen sound grating, but this is an exception. It's very emblematic of 90s music, sounding a bit all hip-hop.
It's very house.
Yes.
Kind of very... like clubby, and honestly, like if you just like had just a little bit more fidelity on the instrument quality coming from the Genesis, like you probably could play this in a dance club somewhere in like
I'm glad you mentioned
Belgium,
that,
and it would work just
fine. This soundtrack was actually played in dance clubs in Japan. That's a real thing that happened at the time.
It
was that popular.
Yeah, video game music actually has respect in Japan. Like, Zuntata from Taito plays live concerts. But we're not talking about them, so...
Right. So, just a quick aside, because we're going to talk about the remake, which has a lot more stuff to talk about. So I think we should why don't we just skip ahead to ranking this one?
Okay. I say this game needs to be really high.
Yes.
I mean, this is better than Final Fight. I'm sorry, but just objectively better. No doubt.
Well,
I don't think there's any reasonable argument to push it below Final Fight. Final Fight was first. There's no doubt about that. But if you put them side by side, this has so many advantages over Final Fight.
Let me just be the devil's advocate here and say that, like, given the distance in time and like how quickly the beat 'em up genre kind of escalated, is it better enough? If that makes any sense. Like, could they have done more with it, building on the foundation of Final Fight / Streets of Rage 1?
Well, that's something I can answer. If you look at Streets of Rage 3, they didn't add a whole lot to it. They added more environmental interaction and a couple of new characters, but they didn't really change the gameplay all that much, because it was pretty good on its own already. I'm thinking between Alien Soldier and Turrican.
I wouldn't want to go much lower than that. So, I mean, you wanted to know some things that this game does that steps it up, There's elements like that are really well thought through in this game. You can, when you grapple someone, you can jump over them so you can reposition yourself to throw them in a different direction.
I do actually like the focus areas on grappling. Like, you can grapple people, vault over them like Cal said. People can grab you, but you can escape from their grabs and throw them instead. And I think it's a really neat thing that kind of helps make it more of its own kind of game.
And another thing it does is, for desperation moves, pretty much every beat 'em up got really lame with desperation moves. It's like a spinning crowd clear or something. In this game, you have a crowd clear itch type one, but everyone has an alternate one if you tap forward and desperation. They'll do a running tackle, or they'll do like a spiral kick. They mix it up in terms of you have more control over what happens in the field, which is really well thought out sort of stuff. And you can throw your weapons at people, or you can hit them with the weapons. There's a lot of stuff that's all thoughtful furtherness in the genre that you don't necessarily get from plenty of other beat 'em ups that were just basically Final Fight. They really thought about it.
Another thing real quick too. I love how fluid this game is. Like, you can just start hitting something on your combo and then flow into other things, and it has a certain fluidness that you don't really see in other beat 'em ups that often. Maybe not to the extent of something like Alien vs. Predator, but you definitely have a lot more freedom to do what you want than most other beat 'em ups.
And
are we putting this above Ninja Baseball Batman?
Yeah, I think it deserves that.
You mentioned Alien vs. Predator, and we kind of got Ninja Baseball Batman here as well. The thing about Streets of Rage 2, and even compared to maybe Streets of Rage 3, and why I think it's the best of the Streets of Rages, and one of the best beat 'em ups ever, is it's that it perfectly encapsulates kind of less is more and minimalism, in the sense that it adds things to the Final Fight formula, but it doesn't go the whole super extra mega combos with tons of alternate moves and a heap of like aerial juggles and things. No, it sits in a really nice sort of middle ground where it has just enough to keep things interesting, enough to give you lots of choice when you're fighting in this game. But there's very little extraneous stuff. Pretty much every move you have is useful. It's not some sort of weird niche move. And I really like that the controls are short, simple to learn. There's not many secret gotchas, but it feels like you have so much control. And it's not a coin feeder. It doesn't need you. If you lose in this game, except for some of the bosses, it's generally because you didn't position yourself right. And that really is something special for a beat 'em up, especially compared to arcade beat 'em ups at the time, including Ninja Baseball Batman.
When a beat 'em up is really hard, it doesn't feel fun. Yeah.
The important thing is just that this game is fairer even than the first Streets of Rage, which, due to its control not being as fluid as 2 is, felt like death was sometimes inevitable, and definitely compared to 3, or at least the American version of 3, which jacked up the difficulty for some BS reason. I have no idea why, but no, 2 remains the crux of the trilogy, and definitely the best beat-em-up on the Genesis. I think there's not going to be a question there. And one of the greatest beat-em-ups ever? Maybe the best? I don't know. I don't know what else I could compare it to. It's just
So can we all live with Bobinator's recommendation right between Alien Soldier and Turrican? Because I agree.
Yeah. I think that's great, unless you guys wanted to jack it up even higher. But I'm fine with that.
It's great. Streets of Rage 2 is a must-play for anyone that hasn't played it and likes beat-em-ups. You're crazy if you haven't played this game.
Even if you don't like beat-em-ups, give it a shot, because it might make you like them.
Okay, I'm watching. Did you want to put it below Turrican or above Turrican?
Above Turrican, between Alien Soldier and Turrican.
I think that's fair.
So our next game is Streets of Rage Remake, which was nominated by @LiloLover87 on Twitter. It was developed and published by Bomber Games for the PC. Final version was released in April 2011, which seems like a long time. I remember when this dropped. This is back when we were like, I think we'd been doing GC9X for maybe a few months, and this is like all we were all playing.
Well, I know this has been in development. This was in development for years and years, so...
Right. So let's talk. I mean, this is a fan game. This is not an official game.
This is like the first fan game I believe we've covered on the show.
Yeah, we've done... Let's see. Yeah, I guess we've done like a weird homebrew thing, if you count Crazy Bus.
This is definitely the first pure blood fan game. This is a fan game. It is made from fans of Streets of Rage for fans of Streets of Rage, and it's Streets of Rage. You can't get more
Wait. Shh.
Like-
Guys, shh. This game is illegal. We shouldn't be talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's not illegal. It is subject to legal action, which is not the same thing.
Totally.
Could I talk about the story of this game real quick?
Please
How
do.
it actually came out and was released?
The rise and fall and its continuing legacy, so
So,
to speak.
like I said, this game was in development by a certain team for several years. I forget when work started, but... So, eventually, years later, it came out. Like, about a day later, Sega ceased and desisted it. And they never gave a real reason, but some people think it's because they were asking for donations to their website, and you can't really do that with a copyrighted product like that. But the thing is, the download link was already out, so it just kind of spread anyway. I don't even know if Sega cares anymore.
I honestly think that somebody at Sega was waiting until it was finished and then dropped the hammer on them, because they knew that you have to drop the hammer on them, because if you don't, you know what I mean? Like you have to say something and do something meaningful, because otherwise you're not protecting your IP. Now, I know there's some debate about this, because the Star Trek people don't go after the Star Trek fan films. The Star Wars people don't go after the Star Wars fan films. But I feel like games are different. Like a fan film is never going to match up to the fan. Like it can't possibly compete with the genuine article. Whereas this game not only competes with the genuine article, it is better than any remake of I can even imagine being officially released.
One more point real quick, though,
Yeah.
if that's okay. It is kind of weird they went after this, because there are so many Sonic fan games out there that Sega just does not care anything about.
It's a difficult thing, because I think when you talk about the Star Trek fan films, I believe Paramount has like a big legal copy for what you can and can't do if you make a Star Trek fan game, of a fan movie. Like really specific stuff. You cannot profit, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. They've got like a pretty big. I think they've got like a big dogma on what you can and can't do as a fan using the Paramount Star Trek thing. And I think maybe it's also because they're such big franchises that are constantly reused, that maybe that gives them slightly more leeway. Like Sonic is constantly Sega. It's so Sega. Sega is always holding on to it. They're always releasing new games. Streets of Rage, Sega threw out basically after the 16-bit era. They were trying to make a new one, and other teams have tried to make new Streets of Rages, but they've never managed to actually get one out the door since Bare Knuckle Streets of Rage 3. So
Right.
I don't know if that helps that they've kind of sat on the property and not done anything with it.
I think it's because it's good. I think that's it. Like it is a competitor to stuff that Sega has on the market right now.
Eventually, Sega did do the 3DS Classics version of Streets of Rage, so I don't know if
But
that...
it doesn't compare, and we should talk about why it doesn't compare, because we've gotten this far without really explaining what this game does. I don't know how you can not know about this game, because it is. So there are 4 Streets of Rage games, right?
There's only 3 that I know of.
Well, there's a Game Gear one, right?
That
I
I'm
believe
not sure that
that's,
counts.
The first 2 got ports, but,
Yeah,
but
they're
they're not
ports.
original. They have a few original things in them, but they're not full-on new games.
Okay,
now, if
so
you want to
it's
talk
got-
about Fighting Force, which some have alleged is supposed to be Streets of Rage 4.
Let's not get into
Let's
Fighting
not.
Force. Let's
Yeah,
just go
let's
with
not.
pure blood.
Because
Streets of Rage.
doesn't.
Yeah.
So this takes the three Streets of Rage games and any additional stuff that you can find in the Game Gear ports of the first 2. And
Actually, just real quick, just to correct you, it's got the entirety of the first 2 games, bits and pieces of the third game, but not all of it, and some
let's see.
original content.
Yeah, that's So okay, yeah, I forgot. I thought it had all of 3, but I guess that's not really necessary.
Yeah, I will admit a criticism up front is that I wish they had a pure 3 path, but what they have of 3 is kind of all jumbled around, which
And
I'm
so
kind of
what-
mixed on, but, I know 3's not as popular as at least 2, maybe the first, so I guess I could see why they kind of did that.
It's less Streets Rage 3, more the best of Streets Rage 3.
Right.
Okay.
Which I think is fine. And so what this game does is it kind of divides these elements up into its own game. So there are different paths you can take, and that becomes like a big part of playing the game. It's just like, because you can see what happens if you go different directions and try different things, and it kind of weaves it all together in some kind of vaguely coherent, somewhat coherent story.
Well, they add little cutscene bits between levels, which they've completely drawn as new graphics. So they do try and tie the the levels together. And for some of the levels, including the Streets of Rage 2 and I think Streets of Rage 1 levels, they actually had little incidental details to try and infer what's happened. Like the transition from the boat stage in Streets of Rage 2 to the beach. Instead of just showing up on the beach, there is now the boat is actually on the screen at the start, and your character jumps off it onto the beach.
Right, yeah.
That sort of thing, which is nice details that you saw in later Capcom games more than the Streets of Rage 2 1992, 1991 period. So,
well, yeah. I mean, that was the kind of thing you'd see in Golden Axe too, which is predates it.
I do like the alternate paths a lot too. Like one neat example is you go into the bar in the first stage, Streets of Rage 2, and you can actually have the option of going upstairs, and if you do that, the bar gets set on fire, and then you go to like a brand new rooftop level, and that's really neat.
Right, and they've got like all the enemies are mixed up a little bit. You can play as all the characters from the games, right? And if there are different versions of the characters you can play with, you can choose. It's kind of like the Street Fighter 2 whatever edition where you can choose like the different versions of Ryu and all that. And
the gang's all here. Axel, Blaze, Skate, Max. Adam who has had his sprite completely redrawn to look more like 2 and 3. And Dr. Zan from 3, as well as several hidden characters, my favorite of which is actually Mr. Freaking X himself, who you just basically beat people around with his machine gun, and it's really awesome.
There's some curious choices they do make, though. Like with Adam, you cannot play as his Streets of Rage 1 incarnation. You can only play as a pseudo-hybrid Streets of Rage 2 and 3 Adam, neither of which obviously exist. So you have this kind of, like, it's cool that he's there. That's really great. But also, when you have a character like Blaze, she gets her 2 and 3 incarnation, I think, whereas Adam only gets a kind of hybrid-y sort of thing. You can't really play Streets of Rage 1 in this game. It's not really there.
There is one small complaint I should make. This, I'm sure some of you know what I'm about to talk about. There is an original character in this game, some kind of ninja lady named Rudra, and she's a bit...
Sonic. I'm sorry, go on.
She's a bit weird, because she's a bit... They present her to be basically better than everybody in terms of her story involvement and her gameplay. And it's a bit out of place, I would say.
I do appreciate that they added an additional playable female character to the cast, since obviously previously you just had Blaze, essentially, and that was it. So it's nice that they did that. But the new character does feel a little out of place, also because they can make art and they could really nail a lot of the graphics in the game, but she doesn't feel as refined as a lot of the other characters. Her art is kind of junkier, and... her like frames of animation aren't great too, so I really appreciate the effort with her, but you're still going to probably fall back on the other characters.
Well, speaking of female characters, though, Elle, the electric whip cyborg lady from Streets of Rage 2, or Electra as the case may be more, is also made playable. A little bit of an odd choice there too, but I like her more than Rudra, so I'll give it a pass.
So,
as well as Rue and Shiva, who I believe is also playable originally in Streets of Rage 3, and Ash.
Let's talk about something else now. Let's not talk about Ash. Let's not ever talk about Ash.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So it does a few other cool things that it gives you a lot of customization options. One of the things I really like is, because we were talking about the music and how like the Streets of Rage music is incredible. It's like, you know, one of the masterworks of the genre, I guess you'd say. Whenever you enter a stage, it'll like a little thing will show up in the bottom and tell you what the name of the track is that's playing. Yeah. So you kind of know, it kind of familiarizes yourself with the music a little bit. That's the kind of detail that people who really care about this would add in, because they love every aspect of Streets of Rage.
The redone music is really fantastic on the whole. There's maybe only like, I don't know, 2 or 3 remixes I don't particularly care for, but then there's like, that's weighed against 70 or so, and that's all really quality. They had like, I don't know, half a dozen different musicians work on it, and it's just great stuff. I think Yuzo would be proud if he heard it.
To start to wrap up, I'd like to bring up one point real quick. This was something I was talking with Cal when I was streaming this game. There is a lot of content in this game and a whole lot of options you can pick and choose from, but this really is a game you would have to be a fan of the series to really appreciate, because if you're not, there's just a lot of stuff that might overwhelm you.
I I mean, there's a lot of options that are like, do you want the Streets of Rage 2 or 3 version? It's like, I guess I want 3? If you're not kind of intimately familiar with every aspect of the games, you will inadvertently make it kind of challenging for yourself. I don't know. I didn't double check this. I don't think there's like a switch that you can say, I want this to play most like Streets of Rage 2. I want to play most like Streets of Rage 3.
No,
I don't know if you can like toggle
that.
anything to tell it to do that.
You have to set it individually.
So it doesn't streamline very much. It expects you to. It's kind of, in a very programmery way, it's that kind of thing where it's like, well, here's all the options. We got heaps of options, and now you have to work out what we programmed into the game. And it's really cool that the options are there, but you're going to have to open this and actually dig through about 3 or 4 different menus full to the brim with options to kind of get the game where you want. And that's cool, but also not necessarily the best experience to just jump in and play. You know, you can't just boot this game up and go, yeah, this is what I wanted. It's a little tougher than that. It does have some very limited mod support, though, speaking of other things that are in it.
There are a lot of mods. They don't change the gameplay. It only changes the levels. Like, you can place enemies and objects and things like that, but you cannot change the gameplay. But people do some valiant attempts at trying to remake, like, say, the Final Fight trilogy, Golden Axe, The Simpsons. It's kind of neat, even if it doesn't always work super well.
It's not quite as sophisticated as the Beats of Rage engine, but nonetheless, I do appreciate that fans of the series who know more about level design than I do can basically make their own Streets of Rage sequels if they want.
Do you think we're ready to rank?
I think we are. Before we do, I want to just point out that although this is one of the great fan games ever made, it's kind of like, it is very, as you guys said, it's like very much on like the kind of rougher edges of things. Not so much because it doesn't, it's as you said, it's not like it's like a buggy, nasty mess. It's more like there's just, it's, you know, it's for super fans. It's for like diehards. And it's not a good jumping on point for the series if you haven't played the other games. But like a comparison would be much more recent AM2R, another Metroid 2 remake thing that was released and then shut down. That one is a much more polished thing that does a lot of the same stuff, where it takes, although in this case only one game, and then just adds a whole bunch of extra stuff and then throws in stuff from later versions or later games in the series and kind of integrates them into Metroid 2. And it's really, that is one where I would say, like, hey, if you want to play Metroid 2, you could play that one. There are different.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about one of the more interesting things about this one is it does beg that kind of question a little bit, like Freedom Planet, in that if you were, they made this game, they spent so much effort making a Streets of Rage remake, and it feels like you guys had the talent, you guys had the team, you could have made a beat 'em up that rivaled Streets of Rage, and you could have done it on your own terms without needing it to be a remake. You could have done a Freedom Planet style game, which was, let's take all the bits we like and then also add what we want. Whereas in some ways this game felt like they took Streets of Rage and they tried to mold it to what they really liked about Streets of Rage. But all that means is you end up with a slightly more confusing sort of mess of a game because it has all the elements that they liked and then has a bunch of options to try and give people what they want. And it comes off as like, well, okay, cool. I'm glad you guys did this, but damn.
I'll just say this. The spirit of this game I really admire. I want to rank it not super duper high because it isn't really, as we've said, isn't like a very smooth experience. But if you love beat 'em ups.
Real quick, the thing is, Streets of Rage 2 was just right with what it had, and this has too much is its biggest problem. Just too much stuff.
It's an embarrassment of riches. I mean, I would say, but it's. I kind of lost my train of thought here.
Sorry to interrupt.
This game would have been better if it let you play as Arbear, but
no,
you can't have everything.
Yeah,
you're saying it was kind of junky. It was kind of not quite all there. But
okay, I remember. Okay, so if you love beat 'em ups, if you really love this genre, this is a great game to play because it lets you just fool around with all the different things that are going on behind the scenes in the beat 'em ups we've played, and lets you, adjust them and see how the game changes. And it also is this like really drawn out experience. It's almost like turns Streets of Rage into like the Capcom Dungeons and Dragons games that just seem to go on forever and have all this extra stuff in them. And those are just,
it's a great
Crazy.
package.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, if you really love beat 'em ups and you just want to play around in a beat 'em up without having to go get, make a game, and just experiment and see how things change. It's really cool. It's really, really cool. So I would put it, I'm going to say below Devil's Crush, above Outrun 2006.
That sounds about fair.
And reason being just that, I mean, it's weird putting like a fan made game in amongst like professionally made stuff. As good as this, as well.
We've been asked to place it,
but we've been asked to place it. And I do think that, like, just imagining this game as a product, it would be weird. And there are definitely things that probably would have been fixed up a little bit better. But, just imagine it as like, it's like you got a demo of of an unreleased game. It would stand up. It would hold up, I think. And so I'm saying above Outrun 2006, actually, because Outrun 2006 is kind of a similar concept in a way. It's kind of like taking like the best of an earlier game and just stretching it out and kind of giving it what super fans would really want to see in it. And it's anybody disagree?
Well, what you've said is you've put this suggestion that one of the reasons Sega probably looked at this game, we have to cease and desist that, is because of the quality. That's a theory you've put forward, is that they were like, no, that's too professional, that's too good. We have to, this isn't some junky games factory click and play like version of Streets of Rage. No, this is a professional, like as close to professional as you can get without actually putting a price on it.
Pretty much.
Release of Streets of Rage. And if Sega had have released this, you would believe that it was, like, if Sega said, yeah, we're releasing a remix of Streets of Rage and we're releasing it for $10 or whatever on Steam. If it was this game, you'd be like, yeah, this is pretty good. There's like an easy 7 out of 10, easy. Maybe not super high, but definitely around there.
I mean, I really hope they come back to this idea and reconsider, because, I mean, look at Sonic Mania. This is that. That is this with permission.
So I am sort of like, it's not above Golden Axe, which is, I'm glad for that, because it doesn't quite reach there. I do wonder, like, how much of this game, I think this is important with the ranking of it, how much of this is because it's taken from the Streets of Rage game, and how much of this is kind of original thought?
Yeah,
in terms of
that's true. Yeah. I mean, it's weird because we just ranked Streets of Rage 2. Maybe we got to put it lower, just in the idea that it's not really its own game, but it kind of is and it isn't. We're kind of ranking Streets of Rage 2 against a weirder version of itself. But things like this will happen as we continue with the show, so we might as well get used to it. Like somebody could ask us to rank like the Street Fighter 2 Rainbow Edition or something like that, and it's like, what do you do with that? Like, that one's really crazy. But like, maybe we got to put it lower. I can see what you're saying here. Like,
I do think it. Yeah.
It might be more Tale of the Sun type territory, or even Poltergeist, because it is just so weird. That
I don't know.
Maybe that's too low.
That's insinuating it's kind of well, not that Haunting was mediocre, but I don't know. I don't want to indict this too much.
Well, let's put it this way: like, if you had a choice between Streets of Rage Remake and Streets of Rage 2, and one of them you could play and the other one you could never touch again, everybody would probably choose Streets of Rage 2.
Yeah.
So, like,
right.
I mean, because this game doesn't do anything better than Streets of Rage 2, it's kind of is Streets of Rage 2 in a lot of ways, but not. And I don't know. I'm really torn because I love playing Streets of Rage Remake. I probably played it more than I've played.
It makes sense because
one.
It's such a fan game for fans, and it's easy to load up because it works on your PC and it'll just work, and it has all modern compatibilities, and you don't have to do anything else to get it running. It just works, which is great.
What about?
I was just thinking somewhere around Ninja Gaiden.
Okay, I mean, I would put it. I enjoy it more than Ninja Gaiden. But I don't think it's hard to really compare it to Ninja Gaiden. Like Ninja Gaiden was a regular game made without the benefit of having the game already made. And it also adds like, the cinematic cutscenes and stuff like that. I mean,
let me suggest this, if you don't mind placing up a few ticks. Between Pulseman and Aliens Infestation,
I'm okay with that.
So I put in the mid-70s. If that's,
I forgot we put Aliens Infestation that high.
I think it's a good game, honestly.
I could handle kind of below maybe Shadow Man or Team Buddies, I think.
How about below Team Buddies and above Marvel Land, the game nobody remembers?
Okay. Final offer. That's the weird void that SOR
the Marvel Land zone. Like, it's there.
Marvel Land is where we put a game we don't know what to think about it, I'd say.
It's kind of this weird limbo, yeah.
QED. There you have it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. It's not to say this game is. It's not saying this game is bad. We don't do that often, but this game is like, you have to have played the other Streets of Rage games, and then you get it, which is not the ideal launching ground for any game. You know what it kind of, in a weird way, it resembles like those like critical editions of classic novels and stuff, where they have all like the footnotes on the bottom of the page, and like it really just is like it's Huckleberry Finn plus a whole bunch of extra stuff. It's like. Anyway. Yeah, no, I can see what you're saying. It's like, isn't this cool? And it's like, yeah, it is cool. I can just go enjoy the original Wark. Yeah, but you can enjoy it in a different way now.
And
like,
somebody people put so much blood, sweat, and tears into this, and I just, yeah, okay. So right below Team Buddies.
It's below Team Buddies. That's right. Yeah,
below Team Buddies, above Marvel Land. That's it. Streets of Rage Remake. What a fitting place for our first fan game of the show. But you know what? If you're a fan of something, you don't have to make an entire game about it. You can help other people do it by going on patreon.com/HG101 and helping us make this podcast by giving us a small monthly donation. For some reason, like when my favorite podcast, which provides me with over 4 hours of brand new content each month, asks me to chip in something like $3, $5 a month, I immediately think, I don't have that kind of money. I can enjoy podcasts for free, therefore any money I spend on them is money wasted, right? But then I had this great experience of meeting one of my favorite podcast hosts in person. This was about maybe a year and a half ago. And afterwards, I realized that although I just bought the guy a couple beers without hesitation, I hadn't been willing to donate anything to his Patreon to help him just pay his bills and keep the show on the air. So because of that, I, immediately after that, just having met him in person made me realize that I should be contributing just a little bit of something. And it feels good. I can't afford to donate money to every podcast I listen to because I listen to a lot of them, as you probably guessed. But there are a few shows that I really look forward to each week because they feel like they were just kind of like made just for me. And for those shows, I try to kick back a couple bucks their way each month through Patreon because I know that if I met those people in person, I'd feel guilty about having not chipped in. If the Top 47K Games show is one of those shows for you, if you'd really miss us if we suddenly disappeared, you should consider going to patreon.com/HG101 and sign up to donate a few bucks a month. You'll feel good and you will help us out and you'll get some cool stuff on top of that. In fact, any amount you give gives you access to ad-free versions of this show, plus an exclusive bonus segment every now and then. And at the $5 a month pledge level, you'll get PDF copies of the 3 most recent HG101 books, which I believe right now includes like a Taito book. And you'll get PDFs of all upcoming books when they're released for as long as you're a subscriber. So something to think about, food for thought. Now back to the show. Our last game for episode 35 is Vendetta. It was nominated by @KikoMars on Twitter. Vendetta was developed and published by Konami for the arcade. Its earliest release date and territory, as far as we know, is July 1991, question marks, because nobody knows what territory that was. So that date comes with a significant grain of salt. But what can we say about Vendetta to round up this trio of beat-em-up goodness?
I want to say, for a game made in 1991, Vendetta might be one of the most 80s game I can think of. It is like pure, undistilled 80s.
It's almost like a post-apocalyptic game. It's so close to being post-apocalyptic in terms of like
Also,
the streets of New York, except it's actually Dead End City, are awash with crime. Only a bunch of criminals can save the world from criminals.
criminals who look like White Mr. T, Hulk Hogan, Billy D. Williams, and Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yep.
How can you go wrong?
Yeah.
They're all color coordinated in the shirts too. You know, well, I'm wearing a red shirt. You guys can't wear red shirts. You have to wear other colored shirts.
I do want to say though, White Mr. T, like, why couldn't they just have made him black?
Well, he doesn't look.
They already
100%.
had
He doesn't
a
look
black
like
guy,
white
and
either. He just doesn't. Sledge, as he's known as. He looks lighter than Blood, but darker than Hawk and Boomer. So.
I
These guys sound like members of like the Bushwhackers or something. Like what? Like
it makes me slightly uncomfortable that the black guy is called Blood and he's like a gang member. That seems really like maybe you guys shouldn't have done that. Like that seems kind of a bit too too real.
We were talking.
If only that was like the worst thing they did in this game. If only.
If only, yeah. Well, should we just get down into like the slaw of despair here?
Well, can we talk about the punching first? How does this game kind of play? Because it's a little different to Streets of Rage. It doesn't have a jump button, I believe.
It's a Konami beat 'em up. Doesn't really play like most Konami beat 'ems. We're just jumping through the air all the time. There's just hordes of enemies on screen all the time. It's a little slower and a little more grounded, I guess the word I'd use is. You don't really have any fancy special moves. You're just punching and kicking dudes and sometimes hitting them with bats.
You can launch a jump attack if you hit punch and kick at the same time while moving, but no, it feels a little bit weightier, not only compared to other Konami beat-em-ups, but like something about it feels almost a little bit more realistic compared to any other given beat-em-up. Like the hits kind of mean more, and you don't take a lot of punishment in this game. Like, I don't know, potentially 3 hits can end you depending on what you get hit by. So, it's not very forgiving. I mean, it is an arcade beat-em-up that never made it to consoles, but
it's a very, very pure give us your money game. There's not much. There's no other way to put that. The game is just so like you put in your money, and then if at the moment you get low on credits, it just starts flashing above your head like, you don't have any money in there. You don't have any money. And it's like, oh, geez, this game really wants to take your money. It doesn't even pretend to play fair most of the time. Like, you'll get hit in the back. Enemies will just bum rush you. It's very hard to position yourself.
You have 20 seconds to get mom and dad over here to shell out.
One thing I love about this game is that when you start the first level, it tells you to get into the city proper, you need to destroy Buzzsaw Bravado. Not fight, not defeat, destroy Buzzsaw Bravado.
Yeah, this game is raw. There's absolutely no dicing around. You probably, like, kill everybody for all you know in this game, and it's tough.
It kind of implies that you do kill everybody, because when you beat them, they practically look like they're dying, because you get, like, a close-up of their mangled face as they're like, they're at the refinery, ugh. And then,
the
like,
priest is
dying.
like reading him their last rites and all that. And,
and then when you beat the game, there's a final boss rush where it's mysteriously they were all resurrected, which sounds like they were dead and came back to life.
Exactly.
Yes.
Another gang with weird powers over life and death.
The old Final Fantasy IV Presto Changeo last second revival. But,
Have you guys ever thought about that? Like, to me, this is something that no RPG, to my knowledge, has ever explored, is what happens in a world where you can pay $100 and raise the dead. Like, what? It's just lawlessness. It's chaos.
But so this game, it's got some interesting stuff that I don't know how common was things. Like when someone's on the ground, you can pummel them, which is really fun. Yeah, I really like that.
That's probably its like most impressive feature, and depending on what character you are, they have a different move they have for getting them while they're down. I know that Hawk Hogan does an outright elbow drop on them, for example.
I played through Blood when I was playing when I played through the game, and he just has this gleeful, like full teeth, like grin, and he's just like punch, 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 punch. Like it's really distressing how much he wants to punch.
This
these people.
game has a a lot more realistic about how it presents a bunch of people going in to beat the shit out of literally everyone. Those brawlers. I love that.
It gets pretty close to actual curb stomping, is what I would say.
I actually like the edge of grittiness in this game, and really how every location just feels as bleak as it does. I buy a lot more that this is a post-apocalyptic setting than Double Dragon, which always claimed it was post-apoc, but I never really got that sense out of Double Dragon somehow. I don't know why. But no, Vendetta really brings in the bleakness.
This one also, traditionally for a beat-em-up, the final boss usually lives in a mansion or some sort of fancy tower or hotel. They live in somewhere that's really nice and like a good place to be.
Yeah, no, where you fight Faust, the final boss, is a real shithole. It's just this, like, darkened, wrecked room, just loaded with spray paint everywhere, and it's just so dire all around, but it gives it a really unique feel. Like, I don't know any other beat-em-up that's
Death Wish. I was just going to say, it reminds me of, like, this, like, late 80s or mid-80s, like, war on crime type things, like what was it? One of the Death Wish sequels, the Canon Films ones.
Three was the one with Marina Sirtis.
There is one thing I feel like you guys are forgetting. This game actually, on the other hand, sometimes has a really weird sense of humor. Like, if you kick people, sometimes you'll just kick them in the nads with a ding, God hand style. Like, you do actually hit them. They grab their crotch and everything.
I think they do throw up if you hit them in certain ways in this game, too, sometimes.
Also,
I've seen the enemies, like, double over and vomit because they're being beaten so much.
Also, there are dogs. Sometimes they will... I think they're actively humping your character, which hurts you.
They definitely bite you. I don't know if they changed the humping for...
And speaking of humping, there's
certain regional differences.
Yeah, there's a certain element in the Japanese version we should probably briefly discuss.
We must. Yeah.
Someone else can handle it.
Japanese.
No, you know all about it.
Okay, if you guys insist. The Japanese version, Crime Fighters 2, has an enemy type that is a half-naked gay leather daddy, and their attack is to grab you from behind, rapidly hump your character, and just start licking them. Yeah. And that does a lot of damage.
They were taken out of international releases for very apparent PC.
Really? Why would they have done that? The funny thing is, I mean, not funny, actually, really depressing thing is it was probably more just like an objection to having such a character in the thing rather than the, like, dehumanization of gay people. Like, that wasn't really what they were concerned about back then. It's like, well, you can do what you want, but don't, like, the act itself was offensive, I guess.
For better or worse, that kind of humor does help to stand out a bit more from, say, Final Fight.
Well, I think that the humor, that kind of humor, probably didn't suit the game. As we're saying, the atmosphere feels pretty consistent and pretty, not entirely grim, but pretty harsh. So to have such a weird slapstick, like, gay, derogatory, like, character in there, it's like, huh? Where'd this come from? Like, why is that there in this universe when everyone else is kind of po-faced, beating each other up to survive kind of deal? I was like, what?
Yeah, well, if I may thankfully change the subject and go back to something that Bob brought up, he said this is Crime Fighters 2, which makes it the sequel to an earlier Konami beat-em-up by the name of Crime Fighters, which was boring. That game is not very good.
It is really, really awful. Don't ever play it. Just play Vendetta instead.
Well, to Crime Fighters' credit, I believe it might have beaten out Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as, like, one of the very first beat-em-ups to have a 4-player support, but yeah, you don't want to play it. Vendetta also does offer 4 players, and that's probably the way it's best played if you can manage to get people together, although I believe Vendetta machines are not as common as TMNT machines and whatever passes for
I have never seen one in the wild.
I used to actually see the game when I was a kid. My mall arcade in the 90s actually had this machine, and that image of the boss Faust all in red looming over the city, that scared the shit out of me as a kid, to be honest. It scared me so much I never actually
played that's very similar to the Streets of Rage one, isn't it? I think the Streets of Rage intro has the villain hovering over the city.
How many games did that? How many games did that where they show, like, on the attract screen, like, like Strider did it, right? They had like the giant
it's
looming
very, very
bad guy inexplicably hovering over an entire city, like holding it in his evil clutches. Yeah,
that just makes me think of the cover to the Bionic Commando, at least the Japanese version.
Oh yeah. So I mean, I guess before we rank this, the one thing I want to say about Vendetta is that on a certain level, the appeal of beat 'em ups is just sheer brutality. And although Vendetta isn't the greatest beat 'em up, it does deliver on the brutality, like man's inhumanity to man front. So
I appreciate that this is a beat 'em up that doesn't shy away from the fact that you are basically pummeling the shit out of people. Like that is the genre, and this game's you're beating the shit out of people. That's what you're doing.
Beat people up until they puke. Beat people up until they die. Beat people up until they beg for mercy, and then kill them. I mean, it's just. It's not quite. It doesn't really match like the Golden Axe level of like like bashing somebody's skull in with like the butt of your sword, like pommel. But it gets pretty close, and it feels
than Golden Axe, because even though Golden Axe is it's got screaming and axes and a guy gets his head cut off in the arcade game, it doesn't have that same. It still has an element of fun, lightheartedness to it, which is kind of weird compared to Vendetta.
This one you get the impression like you wonder like whether the people who made it just they thought America was like this.
Yeah, they must have watched the American movies that were painting New York as this massive crime field that was just people getting murdered 24/7, constantly.
Yeah, to be fair, there were quite a few like horror films set in New York, like Abel Ferraro's Driller Killer, Video Nasty, which took place at the height of New York's actual being a gritty shithole to live in before it was all cleaned up and whatnot. So, I don't know if this game's supposed to be a caricature of any nationality, but, whatever it is, it's just so grim and gritty that it really stands out a lot from its contemporaries.
But
it has some levity to it.
To talk about ranking real quick, I don't think it's as good as Ninja Baseball Batman. It doesn't have quite the same amount of variety and the same amount of crazy new things going on. I'd probably put it closer to Golden Axe.
I would put it way below Golden Axe.
Really, my problem with this game is that it is such a quintessential credit feeder. It is so desperate to get your money.
Even more so than like Final Fight and
I will
every
say,
other
though,
beat 'em up.
To this game's credit, it is also relatively short, even if it does drain your cash. Like, it's only got 5 levels of 6 counting the big boss rush at the end, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. I think it's shorter than
it does have 4-player support, which I appreciate.
And the 4-player.
How much variation is there between levels? Because that's another important thing for beat 'em ups to do, is to change the environs and remain kind of fresh to look at.
I mean, I think the most exciting thing you see is like a city street where you meet the leather daddies.
I believe the weather changes in the first level from clear skies to lightning and cloud, which is pretty neat.
I think the levels felt different enough.
It's more that there's not a huge change between you've got different bosses each level, but the actual enemies you fight don't feel particularly different for the most part, except when the dogs show up, and I don't really like fighting dogs in games as a general rule. So
really, I love it.
This isn't, this doesn't shy away. You beat the dogs to death. Like, that is a component of the game.
It's you or them, dude. It's you.
Yeah, I know. They're attacking you, and they're evil dogs, and you got to kill them, apparently, because they are evil.
So
they've been trained to be evil. But,
Cruelty 101.
There is no mix-up in this game. You play the same. It's a typical beat-em-up in that every level pretty much plays out the same way. You punch people until you get to the end. You fight a boss who are all different, and there's some nice bosses. The twins who have 2 separate guys who have the same life bar. That's nice. Cool little.
That is weird.
One thing about this game I do want to complain about real quick. This is a typical Konami-style game where all the characters are basically identical except their animations.
Yeah, that's very true. Like, it's to the extent that you can't pick your character. It's whichever control you're sitting at, that is the character you will get. So that definitely loses at points in my eyes, that even though they did animate them differently, they are effectively the same character, which reduces the replayability substantially.
I'm thinking like right below Commander Keen Episode 1, right above Knights of Crystallion.
I had been looking at around Road Rash myself, but
I'm okay with that.
I can see that. I mean, it kind of feels weird putting it below Well, no, it's got to go below eSWAT in a way, but then like below Technocop and Revolution X. I mean,
That's not
those
my
are games.
fault. You guys
I
put
don't think it
Technocop that
should-
high.
Actually, I don't think it should go below Revolution X. That's a bit mean.
Well, I mean, it's not like, remember, Revolution X is a game that basically is where it is on stylistic points alone. It has nothing to do with the gameplay. It's just so crazy, weird.
They're actually quite similar games in that it's mostly you just feed money into it and then you quit when you've done.
Don't give up.
Yeah.
Can we place it actually above Commander Keen, just above, below Clash of Demon Head? Because
I really don't know if I'd like this above Commander Keen. I think Commander Keen brings a lot more to the table.
But I'm a lot worse at Commander Keen than I am at Vendetta.
How about somewhere between Knights of Crystallion and Revolution X?
I mean, I can handle somewhere around there.
You're like above Octopus?
Actually, I'm going to go with the original suggestion of between Keen and Crystallion. I can at least understand this game easier than Crystallion, so... Although that's kind of an unfair comparison.
Who's going to be the tiebreaker here?
I have no idea.
I will let it go below Keen. I'm okay with that.
All
I
right.
would push it. Damn it! I would put it below Knights of Crystallion. What a great game!
Okay,
Ooh.
Knights of Crystallion. Is that fair?
Okay, below. All right. I'll allow it to go below Knights of Crystallion, above Uniracers.
You son of a...
Just because of like I said, the point of beat 'em ups is to just exhibit brutality against your fellow man, and just throw mercy out the window and just kick people in the balls.
Well, I guess Crystallion exhibits brutality on basic goddamn comprehensions.
Yeah,
That's
not
what's
against the
higher.
player, although this game does that as well. Yeah. All right,
Hey,
excellent.
yeah.
That's all for this episode of Hardcore Gaming 101's Top Games Podcast. Special thanks goes out to at LiloLover87, at Kiko Mars, and Julesy83 on Stitcher for nominating those games. And thanks as well to those of you we haven't gotten to yet. We will be getting to you soon. And thanks to my lovely co-host and compatriots, and our editor Jeff Rude, and our theme song and chiptune composer Miteki. And of course, thanks to the support and feedback of listeners like you. You can support this podcast by making a small monthly donation at patreon.com/HG101. I know, I did. You can also help us out by subscribing to HG101's YouTube channel, which is fantastic. And you can help us by following at G79X and at HG_101 on Twitter. But most importantly, help us claw our way into the podcasting firmament by getting on iTunes, subscribing to HG101, and giving us a 5-star review. Do it, or Xerxes will refer to himself in the third person from now on. Until next week, keep keeping it real.